Hi, how are you?
Okay. Set up here. It's been an interesting week. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing okay. How is it interesting? Just
it's a sense of I mean, things are still in quarantine, land. It's a different dimension of reality in a lot of ways, but I think like a lot of things are sort of I feel hesitant saying this, but like returning to normal for me in terms of the flow of things. So I'm hesitant to say I feel good about that, and obviously like, there are a lot of things that are sort of like I don't feel so good about what's going on.
Yeah.
Around me or political stuff, but and things like this, like New York State is sort of, I don't live in the city, but New York is this sort of front line or epicenter of a lot of stuff. But so there's always that constant tension, and I feel when people ask me how I'm doing, I feel like I'm sort of this, you're from New York, so it's like, okay. But I mean, given all that stuff, I feel like I'm moving in the right direction, at least for myself, so that's a nice thing.
Yeah.
I'm starting to, like, even the stuff in Slack this week felt a little bit more like, like there's this conference, here's a paper, so that was a nice feeling, so that's good.
Good. Yeah. Hi, Anson.
Hello.
How are you?
Pretty okay this morning.
Good. So I got your materials. I looked them over. I thought that was pretty good. And I've been thinking about like what we might do. Probably talk about it a bit more. But I think the whole idea of doing some stuff with machine learning and that is a pretty doable thing. We'll have to come up with some. Like I said with Jesse, I've been someone informal. I've kind of brought things up in meetings or brought things up on Slack, and he's expressed interest, and then he's gotten involved at some level in it. And that was, he's done a fair amount of work in terms of like having names on papers and different things that he's been able to do and engage in. For you might want something a little bit more formal. So I don't know if there's I'll try to come up with maybe something a little bit more formal for that, but it's probably going to take a week or two to kind of get it in shape, something that we can agree on.
I looked at the last article you linked to the events discussion page.
Yeah.
And that's actually pretty close to like my ideal research interest. Like in a world where like I had no pragmatic considerations in terms of like supporting myself and family, like that would probably be like not directly what like I would want to research, like pretty adjacent to my ideal research topics. I wish I always feel a little bit insecure trying to articulate my ideal research topics. I always feel like really unqualified because I have not done the readings yet because my life has been hectic with trying to get through undergrad health. I don't know if Jesse has mentioned it, but I had to deal with a lot of chronic health problems and getting those together recently. But
yeah,
I'm really interested in like I guess modeling the internal ecosystem and trying to bridge that through computation and seeing and trying to bridge the current computational gap that exists, that makes it so that between theory and execution. So that's like my ideal research interest, but machine learning basically like realistically like why do you get better now?
Yeah. Yeah, I know, and a lot of people, I think, like, I like the theoretical interest or the, the sort of, so that's why this group exists, because, like, I sent you that link about Devorm ML, and that's sort of the other group, well, that's something I've been doing in another group, and that's sort of like, this is like machine learning, sort of straight machine learning, but also applied to biology, and this group is more, I think of it more as like the place where we look at sort of maybe more theoretical view, or maybe a more, biologically inspired artificial life type of view with some machine learning, some philosophy. It's going to be pretty eclectic because it's an eclectic sort of region. It's basically like, I like the idea of an internal ecosystem where, I think that's a good way to put it.
Jesse, I think you're like having some static or something.
Yeah, it's fine. I was moving stuff.
Oh,
okay.
I like the idea of an internal ecosystem, so you can, just sum it up in 2 words. I just like that term, but that's sort of what the idea is. It's pretty eclectic, but I think that captures it. That's definitely something we can do something with. I have a couple of things that we'll be talking today about a couple of things. One is not really related to that at all, but there are a couple other things that we have that are related. So I think we're the only two, or you're the only 2 people here with me today. So if you're watching online, we'll be we record our meetings and put them online so that people who can't make it synchronously can view what's going on. So welcome to the meeting. Thank you, Anson, for the little bit of an introduction. Actually, why don't you introduce yourself more generally? Like, what are your... Yeah.
I'm a data science undergraduate at WMU. I'm a philosophy minor. I am interested in body cognition. I'm currently steering towards something computational neuroscience, computer science with an interest in neuroscience, computational cog-sci-ish in grad school. Right now, I'm either in my last or like year and a half-ish year of undergrad. In my free time, I like to draw, though I haven't drawn for a long time because my life is hectic. I enjoy long walks. I said some of my research interests earlier, but I generally lean towards behavioral side of research, but I'd be interested in strengthening my knowledge of biology. I generally am interested in integrating various theories and learning as much as I can. Though I'll admit that like biology is hard for me, but if you can explain it in a way where it's graspable and intuitive, I'm down to learn.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely something to try to do here because we get people from so many different backgrounds. It's like there are all these like jargon type terms and very detailed things you have to know, like some of the papers we review. I try to review papers that are maybe make them a little bit more easily graspable by, say, like a biology paper for someone in cognitive science. How do they understand it a little bit better? So that's what we try to do in these meetings too, is we try to break things down a little bit more easily. And we're definitely interested in like the educational component, as Jesse has he's involved in some educational stuff as well. So and it's all kind of integrated. So.
Oh, and I've been longtime friends with Jesse, so that's how I got introduced to the group.
Yeah.
To the lab, yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Jesse, you're still muted if you were saying something.
Oh.
Yeah, I would add, I met Anson a few years ago, like, I don't know how many years ago now, over 4 or 5 years ago, like, through, like, psychology, related discussion groups, and, I realized a more similar interest and kind of eventually dragged him into the lab. Because we're going to go to Princeton Vision, which actually this is like the Vision 2018 shirt that I'm happy we wearing today. And that was like, oh, you know, because I knew he was shifting, I knew some of his interests, but I feel like Princeton Vision was sort of this, okay, this is like someone who has a similar interest as a colleague. And I relate to a lot of the sort of nebulous nature of my interests, and I was really happy in this lab because this is the first time I saw it. I was trying to find this through my undergraduate career. Like I graduated and went back to school last year, about a year ago, and I had good undergraduate research experiences, but they weren't really people who were enthusiastic about some of these topics, and my school didn't have much in the way of cognitive science, and they had just computer science stuff, but I wasn't oriented towards these sort of things. So, you know, there's definitely a path to, I think this lab will be good for Anson in finding his way to more specific topics to focus on, and getting skills in the meantime. Like that's something that's this thing I've definitely done in my time here. So I think it'll be good.
Yeah, it's good. Well, thank you, Anson, for the introduction. Thank you, Jesse, for some of the insight there. Today we're going to talk about a couple things. We have the CSV Conf presentation to go over. So that's this Wednesday at, can't remember the UTC time, but it's, I think it's like 4 o'clock. It starts 4 o'clock Eastern time and in the U.S., and it's going to be on Crowdcast, and I'll send a link out by email and probably by Twitter. I think I did by Twitter. I'll send another link out, and so people can attend, like kind of watching it, and then I'm gonna be the speaker who delivers a talk. It's kind of a hard, like a difficult thing to have like too many speakers, so they wanted one speaker per talk on the inside. But basically, we're going to go through the slides, make sure that everything is the way we want it, and then I'll we'll meet up there in the Crowdcast environment, and I think the whole conference is going to be on Crowdcast. I don't know about the parallel sessions. Hi, Stefan. So yeah, let's start with this. Then we'll probably talk about a couple other things as well. I just wanted to start, I wanted to get on with the presentation here to walk through it. So what I'll do is I'll walk through the slides, and we'll, maybe if Jesse sees something he wants to address, we can address it. If someone else has a comment, that's welcome. I just want to get a feel for the slides and how they're, to go through. Because it's about 15 to 20 minute presentation, so it's got to be on point.
I have a question. Do you know, is this going to be, are they having any particular sense of like this is going to be mandatorily pre-recorded, or will it be completely live, or do they have suggestions about that?
I think everything is live on Crowdcast, and then, I think Crowdcast it records and then it saves it for later. Like I think they upload it to YouTube.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I know that. I just asked because I know like a lot of places are making you have uploading a file and then saying that's your presentation. That's
well, I think I don't remember what they have for like, I think there's like a synchronized where people can get the slides offline, and I don't know how they're going to deal with that.
Yeah.
I'll probably make them available offline, like maybe on Twitter, and then like I'll send out a link, and then I don't know who will be like that. That'll be one way to get the slides out, but I'm going to put them up on Figshare, which is like a publishing platform, so people can just go and download directly. So this is the talk, Epistemological Directories for Research, Development, and Education. And so this is the title slide. Bradly and Jesse, the presenters. This is the first slide. It kind of establishes what's going on. So this is a breakdown of different versions of the World Wide Web. So in Web 1.0, we have broadcasted information, annotated bibliographies. Web 2.0, social media and version control. And then Web 3.0, virtual worlds and semantic web. And so that's sort of the idea is that we're moving towards Web 3.0. We're not quite there yet, but this is a way to, this is going to be between 2 and 3 in terms of its implementation. Then what is a historical milestone? So I posed this question early. You say events have a qualitative significance and explain a certain amount of the unknown. Can we do this without subjective judgment? Does this lead to a group consensus or gatekeeping? So this leads into like how we have different topics and we're like, providing materials for them, but it's the people who are curating it that are the people who are really determining what gets covered. We go back. What are common themes across scholar learners? And that's what I call people who are going to use this thing, this paradigm. What do people commonly understand as the truth? What are the most important things to know in order to be competent? What kinds of things do people tend to discover over and over again? What things do people tend to know or tend to seek out? And what are things that have the strongest relevance regardless of whether they are true or important? So out of those, then, we have this one, the second one down. What are the most important things to know in order to be competent? That we'll cover in a little bit more detail here next. And that leads us to a concern called what is the minimal relevant information? So we want to know what the minimum relevant information is you need to know to learn something in a field or in a topical area. And so if you're an informed novice or if you're at an intermediate skill level, which is maybe like you read about things online or you may know things like from an undergraduate course or something, how do you gain expertise enough just to be competent in it? And so this is something that Leonard Susskind addressed in this book, The Theoretical Minimum, which is everything you need to know to start doing physics. So he covers a number of topics in physics, and this is what he thinks you need to know to just be like minimally functional in physics without being dangerous, as they say. And so we see this at OpenWorm, where we have we have to bridge this gap between biology and computation, and we have to do this very big challenge, and we haven't really solved it, but that's something that minimal information could help with. We could understand what that is. So then this is the origins of this paradigm are in Web 1.0. And so this is an example of Web 1.0. This is an example of an educational directory where you have all these topics on the left, and they're stubs where you have information about these different fields, bibliographies, things like that. And it's kind of like Wikipedia, but the peer review, the people reviewing the content here are moderators who have some expertise. So, you go to a stub, it's like Wikipedia, but it's a little bit more formal. This one is not up online anymore. This is actually something was put out by the Konrad Lorenz Institute, and this is what they used to call their theory lab. And it was really just these topics that they cover in their research at the institute. And these are like, just if you want to know about this area, you click on it, you learn about it. So that's kind of the origins of what we're thinking here. So I'm going to go through a couple instances of this, of epistemological directories, and I'm going to kind of discuss how they maybe are related to one another. So the first instance is knowledge spaces. So this is something that's been implemented on the topic of cybernetics and systems. And so in this case, we have a couple of features that are important. This is hosted on GitHub, and so each of these GitHub directories, these folders, are topical stubs. So this is based on key scholarship from the community. So you can see that you can't really see the names on here, but we have things like EGRT, which is the Every Good Regulator theorem, topics like amplification, open systems. So you have all these different topics, and there may be different levels of specificity, but the way, the freedom of this type of platform is you can organize it any way you want. And so we can use version control to encourage edits from the general public, but also keep the control with the moderators. And then we have, we can do edits, and we can modify content through pull requests. So this is a good way to sort of not only organize knowledge in an area for people who might not be aware. It's kind of like a textbook, but it's more, maybe like, I can't think of a word. I hope I don't have this problem during the talk, but it allows you to like kind of shape with the community's input what the most important topics are. Not just here's a textbook that you could read and here's what I think the most important topics are. So then this is the idealized structure again of one of these knowledge spaces. So there are different things we can put in these directories. One of them is using Markdown and using LaTeX, we can build these Markdown files, or maybe even Python notebooks with equations in them. So you can put in equations for different topics. You can put in like a description in Markdown. You can present images which aren't shown here, but basically you can present things in a very visually attractive manner. And you can also use different types of notebooks. So you can use Jupyter notebooks or Colab notebooks, which are interactive notebooks, computational notebooks for simulations and for other purposes. They're downloadable so people can make them portable. And it's, it depends on the topic. People can contribute different amounts of content. So if they want to put in a notebook for a topic, we can host it there. Then we have something called knowledge maps, which are the second instance. These are graphical representations of a field. This is a timeline or a historical summary of key events. And then this summarizes the directories in this knowledge space. So it summarizes a lot of the stuff we saw in the first instance. And we can also use something called epistemological maps to define the knowability of these domains. So I'll show you what an epistemological map is in a minute, but this is good for formulating questions, defining open problems, and for conducting niche literature reviews. So the first one here are knowledge maps. This is a machine learning knowledge map that we built in the Devorm ML group. This goes back to the 1800s, and then it picks up in the 1950s, and it goes to the present. And it just shows like a date attached to some advance. So here we have a digital image processing in the 1960s that contributed to machine learning as a concept. Then we had backprop neural nets in the 80s that contributed, and so forth. And so this isn't particularly clear about, what effect. There's no causality in this diagram, and it doesn't really explain the sort of cumulative effect of these things. But this is a very simple diagram. We do have something maybe a little bit more complicated here. This is the artificial life knowledge map. So this is the field of artificial life, and this has a lot more stuff in it, many more advances, different papers, different experiments, events that happened, and it's it's organized by people who, it's sort of by what the community finds to be important. So it's in the literature review, it's the curator's decision, but it's all kind of put into this timeline. And this is a kind of a messy timeline, but you could break it out a little bit more if you wanted to develop the map more and show these different cumulative events. Again, there's no causality here, but it gives people an idea of what happened when. And so there are a number of issues, though, with these things. So the number of milestones per duration of timeline depends on the pedagogical aims. So if I want to teach about some topic like open software, I wouldn't use all of the stubs that I did in artificial life. I would maybe focus on a subset of those. There might be a small number of milestones that may take a minimal amount of information approach. In other words, in the machine learning example, we saw that we only had a couple of contributions, but that's probably the minimal amount of information you need to know the history of machine learning. Finally, the milestones can stress common themes across learners or stress obscure events that build the foundation for later advances. So in the artificial life map, we have things that are maybe obscure, but they do build on other events that happen later. And so we can highlight those as instructors and as learners. This is an epistemological map. So this is what I mentioned in conjunction with the knowledge map. So this is how you basically filter your facts. So this is how you would build, like, say, for example, a knowledge map or more generally a knowledge space. You would take what we do know, which is this gray bar here, and we'd distill a distribution of facts in this space. So what do we know? We know all the facts there in that space, and we kind of build a sort of a list of those. Then we have a much larger space of what we don't know. And so that's the key, is to try to present what we don't know maybe as well. Maybe formulating questions, or maybe proposing gaps in the literature. So you see that there's a gap, something we don't know. And so we can use this sort of formulation to decide what we need to know in the space of what we don't know. I know that sounds a little bit strange, but the idea is basically we want to be able to build a map of what we know, present that to the student or to the learner, and then kind of address what we don't know, what we're missing, and then what do we need to know in that space. We also have a what do we need to know in the what do we know, of course, but that's what we're dealing with the knowledge maps and the knowledge spaces. And so that's basically the way to conceive of like a particular topic, especially when you need to figure out what to teach or what people maybe should be introduced to, or new research directions. So it's helpful in research as well. Then there's this controlled vocabularies and historiographies slide. Are you going to say something, Jesse?
Yeah. I didn't know if I should say here or the next slide, but let's see. I actually haven't particularly to say about this slide. Other than I'm really prepared.
Oh, okay. So I guess, yeah, so this is a slide on controlled vocabularies and historiographies. So if we use something called a controlled vocabulary, it imposes some top-down control in terms of stub names and including things. So you can take a historical view of epistemology in that it emerges over time. So like in the knowledge maps, machine learning emerges over time. They didn't call it machine learning back in 1950, but it's sort of that road emerged, but we present it as if it's a unified topic. But we also run into the Wikipedia problem, and that's what topics or people are important. So like, who's making the rules for who's important and what's not? Are there people you're missing? Are there topics you're missing? And so forth. So it's hard to do this both as sort of a majority rules exercise and an administrative exercise. they've tried to increase the number of women scientists on Wikipedia, for example, and it's been met with some administrative pushback, but also just getting people involved who can have the expertise to put that together is also somewhat tricky. And then there's also another benefit, which is it clarifies the interpretation of significance. So which key papers are the most important? This is something you learn in a course, in a college course. Maybe, if you're taking a course on some topic, the professor often has like key papers they hand out. And that's the sort of the established wisdom. But there might be key papers that are obscure that you want to cover as well. What leads to something else is the important thing, I think. What kinds of things are relevant for building on sort of the history of that field? So that's something else we want to capture. So this is Jesse's.
I'm not sure if it goes against the aims of your project, but it's not hard to imagine like multiple curators or like a decentralized version of your project either.
Yeah,
it's like a counter to that idea, like to the idea that's inherent that it would need to be inherently top down.
Yeah. I think that's I think that's a pretty good insight.
Even it doesn't need to be like a Wild West, but even like moderate, like you could have like a curated for like cognitive science versus, I don't know, neuroscience. You could have one that's developed. You could have one that's curated for one that's curated for biology and one that's curated for computer science. And there could be pluralities of curators.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, I don't know how Wikipedia does it, but I
think Wikipedia. I think you're right that Wikipedia is pretty top down. I don't know specific, though.
Well, I mean, it's not top down in the conventional sense, but it's definitely like you have a structure of like contributors and editors, like people who verify. They say they to verify things, so you don't get like wacky conspiracy theories presented as fact. That's the idea, but then you also have people say, "Well, this isn't an important topic."
It's centralized,
Right.
Yeah. Because it wants to be a relatively not academic, but like respected source of information.
Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of what I was getting at. I might change it a little bit based on that comment. I think that's a good comment to make. So that's So any other questions? Okay. Well, so this is instance 4. So this is Jesse's Frontier Maps. This is something that is an educational resource umbrella project, and this is the link. And this is the focus of this one is AI, philosophy, and systems science. And so this has been put together by a student who's interested in these topics, bringing these topics together for himself and for other students. This involves highlighting discoveries such as new concepts for the learner. So there's a discoveries directory, links to their terms and their definition. There's also what we might call a staged complexity of discovery. So there are 3 directories here: ideas, systems, and techniques. And so those are sort of, you can think of them as like a staged complexity. So you start with ideas, and you have techniques that implement the ideas, and then you have systems, which are the how those ideas play out in the world, how you interpret them with via techniques. So it's all in that 3 directory space. And so
I'm not sure if I should jump in with things or if we want to finish the slides. So, for the sake of people here, I would mention a little bit of background about Frontier Maps, and there are maybe I should add one more slide to this, thinking about things now, but for this, this may not be relevant for the main presentation, but for the sake of here, to keep you updated, to mention to Anson or when you watch the video, Frontier Maps is this project that came out of a sense of a lot of my interests are transdisciplinary or undisciplinary, and tend to be at the nexus or the focal point of so many things. Obviously, there's like AI and cognitive science, and there's it's and system science as these sort of topical themes, but it was originally born out of this context of how do I even attempt to sort of create a map, a lay of the land? Was how I attempted to describe this at one point originally. Where are my landmarks? Where's my lay of the land in terms of this field? There's this space in reality that covers all these things, whether it's what we're calling cognitive science, what we're calling artificial intelligence, and then specific machine learning parts of the subfield of artificial intelligence. There's system science, there's cybernetics, there's complexity, there's emergence. We're emergence reading for embodiment. Like these all have different sort of starting points and being ways of interwoven into a thread, into a narrative, particular fabric, so on. And it can be very philosophical and hand-wavy and airy-fairy about certain things, but it's like this project was born out of the sense of how can I start to understand, like one of the original questions and concerns that I had making this project was, and the original designs of it, we're talking about layers of complexity now. Like what you see here is broken down into, I think it's the next slide also, techniques, discoveries, and ideas as a means to categorize things. And that comes from a quote, which I can't remember the author right now, but basically saying progress in science tends to come through new techniques, new discoveries, and new ideas, and usually in that order. And when I first saw that quote, I'm like, that's a really, there's a lot that goes into that. And many people disagree with that or think, ideas start things, and I'm not here to really argue that or say the order is necessary, but I feel like if you're looking at things from what I wish I really could do, and it might try to do ultimately, a frontier map in its true form would be a very well curated thing with different labels and layers of analysis into it, like techniques, discoveries, and ideas. Like I could envision a really awesome multi-layer, multi-level, maybe, I don't know if epistemological map would be it, or a general visualization knowledge map that you could sort of almost rotate in like a graphic, a GUI or a graphical interface, and see, okay, here's techniques, here the ideas linked from them, here's how the discovery from this technique influence of that. And like that's sort of like what's actually in my head as far as a much longer term thing. But in the context of right now, I'm one person, and I'm one person on my individual journey. So it's like the frontier map that it exists currently on GitHub and that I'm continuing to develop and flesh out and modify is this. It's sort of like the very subjective, personal, individual explorer's take on it. Like it's absolutely not it's not a definitive. Like there's tons of stuff I could just put up on there right now. Oh, this is an important concept. Yeah. But it's sort of almost an interfacing between me and the topic and saying, all right, well, here's what it does. And even if I don't have it on there yet, like I'm forming the associations in my mind. So like maybe someone like Andrew Sandler would say, oh, this is part of your exobrain. You have this this stuff outside of you that you're making that isn't inside of you, but it's helping you interface with these topics. So to kind of go back more specifically to the slides, what exists right now is trying to create the stages and the different nodes of specific topics and ideas, and I do like the three techniques, discoveries, ideas as sort of macro transdisciplinary filters.
Yeah.
But I think like one of the features of GitHub that I'm looking to implement more is like the wiki option in there, or even just being able to create here's a tag of everything for traditional domain of cognitive science, traditional domain of psychology, traditional domain of computing science. So those things will kind of be evolved along. And then I would specifically also say about like some of the nodes or some of the more endpoints, definitely creating things that are more interactive, especially for my particular preferences in my subjective take. I like getting a level of Jupyter notebooks where you can have concepts and you can have some code that for things that are relevant for it, that you can model, that you can put that are computationally affected by it, either as a concept or as, hey, here's what recurrent neural networks are like. Here's like what original perception, like one of the first things I have on there was a perceptron, 1958 Rosenblatt perceptron, and here's what as a core foundation, even in its sort of infancy towards we're still using this idea 60 years later as a derivative from that idea, and just being able to see what that looks like in code or manipulate that somewhat. I feel like that's really important. So in one sense, Frontier Map at its current level is sort of my personal notes and notebooks in an extended form that other people can share, or I can present. But in a broader sense, like a Frontier Map, other people could potentially use this concept with their own fields of interest, especially if they're not very established in or having a lot of innovation or crossover. So hopefully that gives some broader context to that.
Yeah, thanks. I think there's some links, of course, to the epistemological maps here, and then I like the idea that you mentioned about like different applications, like visualizations and that. So like the knowledge maps I show are very rudimentary compared to some of the like data visualization that's out there. There are a lot of what we saw last week from the ICLR conference, that map of cognitive science and artificial intelligence. So those are actually at this repository. This is, I wanted to make it simple for the talk, but that's definitely something that can be explored further. I think maybe and I'll get to this after I finish the slides here, we could maybe do a blog post on this where we like take the slides and expand upon them. Like, I'll show you after the talk, but so
I think what I might try to do is like either add almost like a very simple diagram or mock-up of what I would envision Frontier Map to be, because it's impossible to really. I can talk about it, but just kind of I might just add a little bit of like try to differentiate the existence of what is available now, not just in the sense of, I've only done so much work on it, which is true, but also like the vision of it, because I feel like for the sake of like actually in the conference and what people are looking at, other people, because most people viewing it at the conference, I don't think are going to have the same specific interest that we do. Right. But I feel like the concept itself is very transferable, and it's almost like in and of itself, it's a potential methodology for educating yourself and being able to convey that to other people or bring other people into it. So like that is an important part of it for me as well.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that's good. So maybe you can put the diagram in after this slide here. So this is just talks about the frontier map should provide minimal information to become competent, and then this is the sort of this is a diagram, a pyramid of different, from broad ideas and assumptions to theories, and it just kind of this is the idea of nodes can lead to other nodes as sub-reference. So it kind of leverages not only the aspects of Web 1.0 of hyperlinks, but also a little bit of Web 3.0 where you have a semantic framework. And it's much better than a wiki in that sense because you can build maybe a meaning from that. But that's something, that's sort of an open idea. So some of the applications, there's an application for theory building. So in this one, I talk about, how you might do some theory building, concepts lead to constructs, establishing a community standard for terminology. So, if you're building theories, you have to have some, very tightly specific definitions. And then I bring up this note-taking system from Andy Matuchak, this evergreen system. This is something that he's worked on. It's a note-taking system where they kind of, deconstruct the idea of notes a bit. They think of notes as the fundamental unit of knowledge and the accumulation of knowledge. So when you're reading something, you take notes. And they're usually pretty informal, but they've built this computational system that allows you to put notes in and then put in links where you can expand them out. Oh, Amendra's here. Hi, Amrendra. How are you? He's someone who is from DevaWorm, from DevaWorm group. So welcome. We're talking about a talk that's going to happen this coming week. So there's the theory building application. There's the integrating with organizational course materials. So I talk a little bit about the online courses that are run through. This is the OpenWorm DevaWorm curriculum, so you can fit those into that. And then this is the sort of the ecosystem of educational materials that I for online educational efforts. And so it fits into this somewhere, probably in this area near the hypothesis application. And then this is a future direction also, cybernetic model of interdisciplinarity. So this is actually maybe what you're talking about too, is that we're facilitating new contributors from allied fields on a regular basis. And so we want to build a model of interdisciplinarity based on the practice of transdisciplinarity. So it's like this people coming from different places, contributing knowledge, and from that we're going to build this interdisciplinary sort of map of things. So philosophy and computer science and all this. But we have to keep in mind that it's being built not by a couple of gatekeepers necessarily, but ultimately by a community of people who are doing this work. So it's not just one professor or one expert who's distilling the information. And then this is the data reuse initiative. So this is the data reuse initiative that I've organized through eLife Ambassadors. And this is an initiative that's, interested in issues around data reuse, but it's much more than that. It's about taking data that have been collected from different groups and, advocating for, the construction of models and metadata, improving replicability and things like that, understanding how scientists use data. So then I would put in a plug for this, and if people want to join in to that group, they're welcome to do it. There's the website, and that's it. And this is my cute little thing. Thanks for your attention. I put those on my talks, and give it a little bit of character. But so I think this might be. I might have to skip over some stuff. So Jesse, if you have an idea of what you might skip over, if you had to, send me a note in Slack, because I think that might be a little too much for 15 to 20 minutes. I don't want to blow through something significant. Yeah. But I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I kind of went on, I said a bit, I said, I gave a much more detail than what will be in the talk, but I think it could be reduced. I might add, outside of the slides, I mean, I think after this was a good, to talk about everything in the same context. I might adjust the slides a little bit and add one very brief slide that would just be kind of a discussion point. So I think that would definitely, I feel like my section would be fairly condensed overall, like at least to the point 4. As far as everything else goes, I will continue to think about that. If there's anything we can combine or cut down, it's not that much time, and it's one of those topics which is sort of, reflexively, you have to kind of create this broad context at first, a general idea, and build upon it to get to your point. Is how it is. So yeah.
So what we might do is we have the slides, and I would leave all the slides in there for now, and you can add in your slide. And what we can do is like kind of cut back a few slides by hiding the slides. So all of the slides could be published on Figshare, for example. And then for the talk, you can hide a few slides. And by hiding slides, you just have to like right-click on the slide, I think. And I don't remember how to do this, but there's a way you can hide. I'll figure it out. Just give me the number and I can hide it. And then when you give the presentation, it hides the slide. But the reason for that is, it can be both condensed visually, like you can walk through it, and just the essential slides, but also when people look at it later, they can see all the slides and they can get the information that way. But then we can also do a blog post. And so I have this this example, and this applies to ICLR as well. What I've done for past conferences is put together, like, take the slides and save them as like images, and then put them in a blog post. And so you'd put them in this blog post, and then after each slide you can annotate it. I don't know if this is coming in very slowly. Okay, there it is. So this is Artificial Life 13. This was a conference that I attended. And so this was in East Lansing, Michigan on July 19th through 22nd, 2012. This was it's a conference on artificial life, and they have a lot of different topics. So, it was like going through, actually these slides were from a couple of different topics. This was actually on a summary of the conference that I did for my lab group at the time. So I did this kind of like, you have all these different things that went on at the conference, and there are different slides, and people can click on the slide and read it, right? And then there's some annotation underneath. And then, we discuss, different topics, different things that went on, but also like, annotating it. So that's one way to do it. And that way you can like present each slide and annotate it a little bit and give it a public face. So all those things can be used to sell these ideas. And with a blog post, you get a pretty good audience, people just stumbling upon it. And
I was going through the slides again, and I feel like there might not be that much you actually have to take out, especially because a lot of stuff, there's currently 24 slides, and particularly the beginning and the last 2 slides is 20 slides, and if you want to, like, for presenting, if you want to try to aim for like 1 minute a slide kind of a deal, there are a lot of this, quite a good chunk of the slides probably won't need a full minute to get into. Like when you're talking about the knowledge maps, like you could probably get away with less than a minute for one for them, So I feel like it's actually not that bad. And then the ones towards the end of the slide are much more just like, blazing through that. So if Amy, it sounds like it's a hard 15-minute limit on that.
Well, I think the slot is for 20 minutes, so you can, people are going to ask questions.
Oh, yeah.
Usually 5 minutes for questions, but I think it's flexible in that sense. But usually at conferences they go over. They try not to go over, but it always happens, especially with the online conferences.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think yeah.
I think it's doable, and I might if you want, I could just give like a sense of I can give my perspective on what. This isn't quite the right way to say it, but how much time should be spent on each slide, or where to allocate time on a project relative to the slides? I could say that in Slack if that's of any use, but I'm sure you could. I don't think you need my input on that, but if that's helpful, I could suggest things.
Okay. Oh, are you asking me a question about?
Oh no, like I could give more feedback on if I was presenting how would I try to manage it in the 15-minute time limit, basically.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
We can move on to other stuff when it's taking time on it.
Okay, well, yeah, I just wanted to go. I want a dry run. I want to make sure that we get it in, and it's people like it. People aren't confused by it. That's what I'm trying to avoid. So that's good. Well, thank you for the going over the slides. And then Wednesday is the day when it's presented, and it'll be available online afterwards. So that's, and then I was going to talk about the blog post, but I already did that. I wanted to bring up, let's see, we're almost out of time. So I had some papers, but we'll do that next week. Let's see, what else did I want to talk about? Oh, I wanted to talk about the collective intelligence abstract, which was rejected by the conference. I mean, that wasn't surprising, but it's like, we have a decision to make on that, whether to, maybe pursue it or not pursue it, or to rethink about it, or whatever we want to do. So let me go to this real quick so people know what it is. They can remember what it is. It's this abstract that was, it was an extended abstract that was submitted to a conference a couple months ago, and it was like a pretty quick deal. This is very slow. I don't think it's going to work. That it was a very, it was just kind of put together for the conference, but it was based on things that had been done previously. And I can send out a link in the follow-up email, but it's definitely something if people are interested in, we can follow up on. It's about 3 pages. It's really lays out a computational architecture for some agents, and they're exploring their world and taking different perspectives on them. And there's the agents have a genotype and a phenotype, and it's not something that's easily pulled off in 3 pages. So that's why I wasn't really surprised. I've done this sort of thing before, and it's kind of like, can you do it in 3 pages? Maybe, But we'll think about that for next week, or talk about it some more. But yeah, it's there. I can send out an email on that. Also, I think that's it for this week. I don't really think I want to. There's nothing else urgent we need to talk about.
Yeah, the only thing that would come to my mind is like general thoughts or projects to work on for the summer. Like obviously, I'm going to be going forward with the complex geometrics, contextual geometric structures project. Like that's going to be kind of my main thing. But I think I'm not quite sure what he's going to be doing it, but I think it'll fit in under that somewhere of our topic.
Well, I think one thing that I was talking about on Slack this week was this MetaBrain models repository. So since the project wasn't picked up by GSOC, and I apologize, I tried to get the slots, but I couldn't get anywhere with that. So I'm I've decided to open this up and combine it into something called MetaBrain models. And so this is a repository. It's open sourced now. So it's basically combining multiple models into like a meta model or something that maybe approximates different aspects of the brain. So like I presented on this at BrainTC 2019, which is the Twitter conference from 2019. And the slides for that are in here, and it basically lays out this idea of a meta brain model, which is to have two or more models, like a hybrid model, that models different aspects of cognition or the brain. And so that includes the contextual geometric structures, the developmental Bradenburg vehicles, and some other hybrid approaches. Actually, I put the CI abstract in this folder, which is, so I actually have this. This is what I was talking about. Would be part of this MetaBrain models as well. And so this is a graphic of the idea. So you have these representation-free models, which are like Bradenburg vehicles or sort of a generic neural network. So it's like a network that has a lot of connectivity, but it doesn't really have a representational scheme, And then as opposed to these representational rich models, which could be, anything like from like a computational schema to other types of models where the representation is key to the operation of it. We have some framework for representation, right? And so the idea is to combine these two, but not to do it in a way that's sort of ad hoc, but to do it in a way that sort of resembles the relationship between, say, like the limbic system and the forebrain of a mammal. So in the representation-rich models would be kind of like a neocortex. Representation-free models would kind of be like the midbrain. And so, if you think about how those function with respect to something like motor control or vision, you get an idea of what's going, what the relationship should be. And so, I mean, the specific model that's implemented isn't necessarily as important as this relationship. And I mean, obviously, the models are going to be important in terms of how the overall model functions, but the idea of like kind of building this relationship is equally as important. I think it addresses a lot of debates in like modern machine learning with respect to like, representation and, deep learning. So deep learning is just a network where we kind of know what the output's doing. We don't, the inside's kind of a black box, but there really isn't a representation for objects or for, knowledge or for semantics. So that's not something that you may be able to like interpret things in a certain way using a deep learning model, but you don't have that built in. And then we talked about last week, of course, that there are pitfalls to sort of a symbolic model, least of which is that we don't know what the world looks like. I mean, we know kind of what we believe, but we don't know what the world actually looks like. And so that's the idea here. We want to build a hybrid model that one part of it is a representation, the other part is representation free, and then we'll put those together in some way that allows you to say this maybe is something that the brain is doing. Maybe it's a nervous system on its own that exhibits intelligence. That's the basic idea, and that's kind of what I was getting at with the GSOC project. It was like we had the developmental Bradenburg vehicles. They would have their nervous system. They would maybe interact with things, exhibit these taxic behaviors like attraction to light or something. But then you would have this representational layer, which had, like, you could represent light in different ways, maybe like as a proportion of like darkness or like in relation to other objects. There are beliefs that would be built from those propositions, and you'd get like a representational system. But they don't have to, use contextual geometric structures. It could be like something like a expert system. Of course, that wouldn't be very good, I don't think. But like, you know what I mean? It's like you have this other layer. So that's that. So I've kind of opened this up, like, and for those of you who aren't familiar, I think you're all pretty familiar with open sourcing a project. Basically opening it up to the larger society and saying if you want to contribute through a GitHub commit or something, you're welcome to do so. But there's as we build on this theme, there's going to be more to say about it. More people will be attracted to it. I have some stars on the repository now, but I don't know how interested. People aren't going to be interested until there's something there. So, other than that, this summer I think we can work on that. We can work on maybe doing some readings on open science and open source. I have a library of open source materials, so I think it's important for everyone here to read maybe about how open source projects are managed. I think for Stefan, even he's trying to do this open source thing with EEG, and I think that would be good for him to kind of get some. I think he's already had exposure to it when he was a GSOC student, but maybe we can discuss some topics a little bit more in detail. Because I think it's always good to have, with some of these open source projects, a lot of them fail, and you need to kind of know there is some body of expertise out there. It's just not, you can't really, I don't think you can really take a course on it yet. So Stefan or Amrendra, do you have anything to add to what we've talked about?
Thanks, Stefan.
Oh, he's not here. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I think
he had to leave.
There's one more thing I would say about future events, but if Anson or if anybody else wants to talk, go ahead first.
Oh, okay.
Everybody's music.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess what I'll say is there's some interesting events coming up. Maybe next week we can talk more about them. We've been talking about NeuroMatch and NeuroMatch Academy. But I also saw, I think, did you mention the Leggett Walker, the Walker conference? Was that?
Yeah. So this week.
That looks interesting. But,
yeah.
Sorry.
So this week there's Dynamic Walking is a conference. I attended the first one years ago, and it was pretty good. It's basically about robotics, people doing this research with passive locomotion. So it's like you can take a pendulum and you can swing it. And engineer named Tad McGeer years ago discovered that if you took a pendulum, an inverted pendulum that sits like this, and you swing it and you introduce energy to it, it'll walk like a human bipedal gait. And so it'll walk down and so people got fascinated by that. And I said, well, how do you build a robot that walks, but in a way that's that isn't where you have to plan every step. And so and I don't know if you've seen this on YouTube with the Boston Dynamics robots, the dog that they have. And it's just, they have videos of it online where the dog, they kick the dog and it scrambles and it stays upright. And, the idea is to build a robot that can do this without any sort of neural control. And so that's what the conference has traditionally been about. And so if you're interested, it's online. It's free this year. And they'll have talks by a lot of different experts in that field. And so if you're interested, I can send out a follow-up email, again, with the link. It's this coming week, Monday through Thursday, so if you want to go.
I think they mentioned the mathematics of that Anthony Camaro book. They talked, in the Anthony Camaro book, they talked a lot about, synchro. I forgot, I don't have the book on me, right now, but they talked a lot about, the mathematics of basically the mathematics of synchronicity, it was a lot of how things sync and how things tie in together and how you get things to how you, I didn't understand the equations. I didn't spend the time to understand the equations, but it was how it was modeling how you could get. The example he used was how to get words to map. How you getting beat, rhythms to match up. So I could see that applying to. I could see that easily being really relevant to gait.
Yeah.
And walking. I wonder. I might look into that and see if that's actually related to the walk to.
Yeah. Well, there's a book, Dynamic Patterns. It was written by Kelso, and he actually had. I think I have a version of it. He talked about that a lot, like using like dynamical systems to analyze things like syncopated rhythms and things, and then it goes into like walking, gait and things like that. So there's this whole class of problems in cognition you can apply dynamical systems to, and the representation is, like just a dynamical system and some equation, and then you fit it to this wide class of phenomena. They're usually like oscillatory. There's some, rhythm to them because, when you walk, you have a rhythm. When you dance or when you listen to a metronome, there's a rhythm, and you have to figure out how the brain attends to that. And so there's a lot of that in there that's relevant to cognition. The robotics work is, it's this passive system where you're not putting any energy into it. So actually, in this case, there isn't a brain. But it's interesting that, you have this, you say, well, the brain is doing something in terms of rhythm, but you can also reproduce that without a brain. But the common link there is that representation of dynamical systems. And so, I don't know what that means, but, it's definitely something to think about. People have been thinking about it for a long time, so. So any other questions or comments?
Yeah, sorry, I might mention one more thing. There's a really cool, I guess there's a seminar, but there's this web series called Seminar in Math and Consciousness. And like if you see if you look at my camera right now, I'm trying to show it. This one was Attending the Illusion of Consciousness with Delega and Dewhurst. And there are many different speakers in the series, so I don't know what they're all going to be about. But this was particularly interesting regarding some of the concepts of how consciousness is potentially, it was related to many concepts in emergence, and related to the emergence reading group that I'm a part of with Dr. Yo John from Boston. And actually, Anson was in the group too for one of the meetings. And I'm not quite sure how to say it fits in with things, but there are some interesting philosophical and other points to it, but they actually are trying to get at some mathematical things. And I feel like it's particularly germane to a specific thing you might be doing in the lab, but it sort of provides this, some of the talks at least, and this one in particular seemed and did give some interesting background. So it's something that worth checking out, even though I'm not sure it's just one of those, it's just a notable free thing that's available right now. So I kind of wanted to mention it, but I think we're in a very interesting situation in terms of what's available this summer, because a lot of things are available this summer that people might not otherwise have access to. So it's just kind of this game of, hey, did you hear about this? And I kind of go to it, even though it's all virtual. So I was trying to mention these things when I can. But that's it for me outside of any kind of other updates. And I'm looking forward to. I'm like, as far as the CGS stuff, like I'm looking forward to kind of getting up to gear with that. So I think I'm more to say on Slack, and I might talk to you more about that in sense of having kind of a structure to the project going forward, or like not quite the same as the GSOC stuff or timeline, but a general sense of what to do. So after the CSV stuff is all done, I'll probably talk about that more.
Okay, yeah, that's good. And Anson, we'll talk a little bit more about your summer experience. Maybe we can link it into that. But we can talk about that a little bit more, maybe offline, about what you might want to do more concretely. But I think definitely, this is definitely going to be, I think, a good experience for you this summer. And then Amrendra, or Anson.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. And then Amrendra, if you're interested in this, in what you saw, let me know offline. If you want to present something, or if you want to discuss a topic, or if you want to contribute, let me know. It's open up. It's opened up. So if there's anything that catches your eye, let me know. So thanks for attending. We're past the top of the hour. We kind of started a bit late, but I think we're okay. And so everyone have a good week. I'll see you offline and next week. Everyone take care. Hope everyone's doing well. Okay.